A massive blizzard buried the city of Boston. Inside a freezing mansion, little Grace stood on a small plastic stool. She was expertly flipping a pan and chopping vegetables all by herself. Her tiny practiced hands would make anyone's heart ache. Through the thick smoke, she was cooking a surprise birthday dinner for her dad. Grace kept checking her pink smartwatch, smiling to herself. She thought her parents would be so proud to see she had learned to cook, but it was nothing more than a foolish wish. By 10 p.m., the food on the table was ice cold. Her dad's phone went straight to voicemail. Exhausted, little Grace collapsed onto the cold table and fell fast asleep. Late that night, the front door finally clicked open. Sean and Helen walked in, holding hands with another little girl, Chloe. Seeing her own daughter asleep on the table, Helen felt no pity. Instead, she snapped, "Why isn't this child in bed?" Sheehan didn't even look at Grace, offering only a cold sneer. "She is just stupid," he scoffed. Then, their spoiled adopted daughter Chloe ran up to Grace. She clutched a plush pink deer and began to brag. "Look what Daddy bought for me," Chloe gloated. The noise woke Grace up, and she stared blankly at them. It was her dad's birthday, and she had worked all day to cook for him. Yet, he forgot her completely and bought an expensive gift for Chloe. Before Grace could even feel hurt, Sean glared at her coldly. "Since you are awake, clean up this mess and go to bed," he ordered. Then his face softened into a warm smile as he picked up Chloe. "Let's go watch cartoons in your room, sweetie," Sean said gently. Helen followed them out without a second thought. As they left, Chloe turned around to throw a smug smirk at Grace. Grace was left completely alone in the massive living room. She looked at the old family photo on the wall and burst into tears. She wondered why the father who used to love her so much had changed. Years ago, Grace was the center of their universe. Her parents used to wrap her in love and sing her birthday songs, but all that happiness vanished the day they brought Chloe home. Grace remembered exactly what her father told her that day. With a terrifying glare, he warned her to always yield to Chloe. "Don't you dare fight her for attention, or I'll make you pay," he had said. Back in reality, Grace sobbed as she put the untouched cake in the fridge. She cried, wondering what she had done wrong. Suddenly, a bright white light filled the dark kitchen. An old spirit with long white hair and a silver beard appeared out of nowhere. He looked at her with deep sorrow and sighed. "Little fairy, your time on earth is done. It is time to return to heaven." But even after being hurt so badly, Grace couldn't bear to leave her parents. "Please give me 7 days, Grandpa," she begged through her tears. "If they still love me, I want to stay." The spirit sighed at her innocence, but took pity on her. "I will give you 7 days. Call me whenever you are ready," he said. The next morning, Helen bragged about making breakfast at 6 a.m. But when Grace walked out in her school uniform, Helen's tone turned icy. "There isn't enough food. Go find some leftovers in the kitchen." Grace opened the pot to find only a hard cold bun and a bowl of pickles. Meanwhile, at the dining table, Sean snatched an egg from Helen. He gently peeled it and handed it straight to Chloe. He smiled, saying Chloe needed the nutrition to grow big and strong. Then, he turned to Grace with a look of pure disgust. "You are old enough to skip meals anyway, just eat the pickles," Sean snapped. Grace bit her lip, fighting back tears as she forced the cold bun down. Later, at the school sports day, a large banner hung over the field. Sean and Helen participated in the three-legged race with Chloe. They worked perfectly together, crossed the finish line, and won first place. But Grace was completely abandoned, standing alone in a dusty corner. She stood there covered in dirt while other parents pointed and whispered. Her homeroom teacher, Miss Lee, noticed her and knelt down with concern. "Why are your clothes so dirty? Grace, where are your parents?" Grace looked at her parents celebrating in the distance, her eyes full of tears. Yet, she forced a proud smile to protect their dignity. "Those are my parents. They love me the most," she told her teacher. After the event, her parents ignored her again and took Chloe out for a feast. Miss Lee gently comforted the sobbing little girl. Grace told her teacher she would stay as long as her parents showed a shred of love. Miss Lee sighed softly and took Grace aside to play. Soon after, the ugly truth behind the parents' cruelty was revealed. On another morning, Chloe had begged her parents to take her to an event. Sean had agreed immediately, but Helen felt a sudden wave of guilt. She reminded Sean that they had completely forgotten about Grace the day before. But Sean snapped at her, completely losing his temper. "She is the older sister. She needs to learn to yield to Chloe," he yelled. Later, in the back of their luxury car, Chloe grabbed Grace's favorite doll. During the struggle, the doll tore right down the middle. Chloe immediately burst into fake tears to blame her sister. Sean turned around and screamed at Grace for bullying her sister. Grace cried and tried to explain, but no one listened to her. Driving the car, Helen felt an eerie chill run down her spine. "Honey, are we being too harsh on Grace?" she asked quietly. Sean let out a long heavy sigh. "We don't have a choice. Did you forget what the guru told us?" It turned out that everything started when Sean's business was failing. Desperate, he had met a shady spiritual guru named Greg on the street. Greg filled his head with lies, claiming Grace carried a terrible curse. He said loving her would completely ruin the family's wealth. The guru told them to treat Grace with absolute coldness and isolation. He said they must adopt a girl named Chloe to unlock their fortune. In the car, Sean tried to comfort his wife and reassure himself. Once the company goes public, I will make it all up to Grace, he said, but they had no idea that tragedy was already knocking on their door. While they threw a lavish anniversary party for Chloe, Grace was left alone. She was wandering through a crowded Boston mall, completely forgotten. Suddenly, her body broke out in severe, painful hives. She struggled to breathe and collapsed heavily onto the icy floor. Soon, Sean's phone rang at the party with an emergency call from the hospital. In the ER, Grace lay on the bed with an IV, her body covered in red rashes. Dr. Miller chewed the parents out without holding back. How can you be so careless? Your child has a lethal seafood allergy. Helen wept and apologized, revealing the horrific truth behind the attack. Before the party, Sean had taken the family out for a seafood dinner. Grace had refused to eat because she knew she was allergic, but Sean thought she was just being a stubborn, picky eater. He slammed his hand on the table and roared at her in the restaurant. If you don't want to eat, get out and go home by yourself. He had screamed. That was why Grace ended up collapsing all alone at the mall. On the hospital bed, Grace woke up to the sound of her parents whispering. Helen was crying, but Sean remained cold and calculated. We must stay distant from her until the company goes public, Sean whispered. She's young, she can handle a little sacrifice for our future success. Hearing this, a tear rolled down the corner of Grace's eye. The innocent child completely misunderstood her father's words. She truly believed they secretly loved her and were just enduring this for business. A spark of hope returned to her heart, and she decided not to leave. She held Helen's hand tightly and made a humble request. Sunday is my birthday. Will you celebrate it with me? She begged. Seeing their daughter just out of the year, the parents promised they would. When Sunday arrived, it was the final day of the Spirit is deadline. Grace put on her favorite blue dress and drew a beautiful family picture. She waited in her room with pure joy, counting down the hours, but noon passed, and her parents were nowhere to be seen. She called her dad's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Meanwhile, a grand feast was underway at a luxury restaurant. Helen checked her phone and felt a sudden pang of hesitation. Today is Grace's birthday, shouldn't we go home to be with her? But Sean dismissed it with an indifferent shrug. I completely forgot, but we can't leave Chloe's party right now. Besides, the guru said keeping Grace close will ruin our wealth, he added. Helen stopped arguing and went back to feeding Chloe with a smile. In the empty mansion, Grace curled up in the corner, sobbing silently. With a flash of light, the grandpa spirit appeared once more. The 7 days are up, little fairy, have you made your choice? Grace wept and begged. I don't need gifts, I just want my parents. The spirit sighed and waved his hand, creating a magical vision in the air. In the vision, her parents were laughing, crowning Chloe, and singing to her. Sean and Helen looked happier than ever, treating Chloe like a princess. The scene completely shattered the last bit of hope in Grace's heart. They weren't staying away for business, they simply didn't want her. Grace wiped her tears, the light fading from her eyes forever. She took off her smartwatch and left the drawing on the desk. Take me away, Grandpa, I don't want to stay here anymore, she said. The spirit patted her head gently. Let's go home to heaven, sweet fairy. With a wave of his sleeve, Grace turned into a beam of light and vanished. Late that night, Sean and Helen finally rushed home with Chloe. They talked about how bad they felt for missing Grace's birthday, but Sean assumed Grace was mature enough to understand. When they opened the door, the house was dead silent. Sean felt a sudden chill and opened Grace's bedroom door. The bed was neatly made, but the room was completely empty. Chloe immediately started whispering venomous lies to her parents. She's probably just hiding to throw a tantrum, Chloe muttered. Sean lost his temper, threw Grace's gift to the floor, and yelled for her. He began furiously searching the room to drag her out. Instead, his eyes fell upon the drawing left on the desk. On it, Grace had written, Mom, Dad, I am really leaving this time. Goodbye. Sean stood frozen, feeling as though he had been struck by lightning. Before he could process the shock, a loud crash echoed from the living room. Chloe screamed in agonizing pain. The parents rushed out to find Chloe burned by a knocked-over kettle. Chloe cried hysterically, claiming she only wanted to pour them some tea. She blamed her burnt arm on an old injury from the night before. Seeing the blisters on Chloe's arm, the parents were deeply distressed. Sean instantly raged against Grace, calling her heartless for not being there. Chloe took the opportunity to weave another perfect lie. She claimed Grace ran away to a closed summer camp out of jealousy. To check the story, Helen quickly called the schoolteacher. Miss Lee confirmed the camp was real and completely cut off from the world. Helen was still worried because of Grace's recent allergy attack, but Sean, still consumed by anger, cut his wife off coldly. Let her go if she wants to be selfish and dramatic, Sean barked. Helen went to the kitchen to cook dinner for Chloe. Left alone in the living room, Chloe dropped her innocent act. A sinister, wicked smile spread across her face. She laughed quietly, thrilled that her rival was finally gone. Now, the family fortune and their love belonged entirely to her. Still, she worried about what would happen if Grace ever returned. Sneaking out of the house, Chloe met a janitor in a dark alley. That man was her real father. The ruthless pair had spent a year plotting to steal Sean's wealth. Her father even planned to sell Grace to a remote village forever. Chloe bragged that her summer camp lie had bought them enough time. After the meeting, Chloe returned home acting as if nothing happened. At dinner, she played the perfect daughter, serving food to Sean, but looking at her, Sean felt a strange, unsettling wave of unfamiliarity. He shook his head, brushing it off as exhaustion. After dinner, Sean went to his bedroom to find a tie. Moving his suit jacket, he discovered a custom smartwatch underneath. It was the flagship prototype his company had just developed. His hands trembled as he realized Grace had laid out his tie and watch. A massive wave of guilt and regret washed over his heart. The next morning, Sean walked Chloe to school. In the elevator, neighbors were bragging about their brilliant grandchildren. One neighbor looked at Sean and delivered a sharp mocking comment. Imagine spoiling an adopted child while sending a straight-A student away. The words pierced Sean's heart, bringing back memories of his cruelty. As he stood numbly outside the school gates, a woman blocked his path. It was Grace's piano teacher, holding a sparkling first-place trophy. The teacher slammed the trophy into his hands, furious. "How could you ignore your daughter's absolute genius?" she yelled. "You didn't even sign her up for the masterclass. You are terrible parents." Sean stared at the heavy trophy, tears blurring his vision. Suddenly, his phone rang frantically. It was his lead developer. "Sir, our core GPS tracking system has crashed globally," the man gasped. "Millions of users are locked out, and distributors are demanding refunds." The business crisis exploded instantly. At the emergency board meeting, furious investors slammed the tables. Mr. Davis mocked Sean for using an adopted child to test their products. Facing total bankruptcy, Sean suppressed his rage and issued a challenge. "Give me 1 month to fix the system, or I will pay tenfold," he vowed. Back in his office, an exhausted Sean opened the tracking program. Suddenly, his eyes widened as the screen flashed a single signal. Grace's smartwatch location was pinging from inside their own home. Sean wept, assuming the system was completely broken and useless. He stayed up all night, desperately rewriting the code on his computer. In the dead of night, his phone suddenly lit up with an incoming call. The caller ID read, "My sweet daughter." Sean answered with a heavy heart, hearing Grace's sweet voice. "Guess where I am, Daddy?" she whispered softly. Before he could answer, the heavy office door slowly pushed open. Grace stood there in a beautiful new dress, holding a warm lunchbox. She smiled brightly and said, "I was worried you'd forget to eat, Daddy." Sean burst into tears, rushing forward to lock his perfect daughter in a tight embrace.